She laughed, a sharp, knowing sound, as if she'd already read the final chapter. She said he wasn't even qualified to change a tire, let alone troubleshoot a piece of high-end German engineering. She made a joke of it in front of everyone, convinced her degree was enough to conquer any challenge, but she didn't understand that sometimes silence carries an answer louder than any shout, and when he finally showed what he was capable of, he didn't have to raise his voice. The roar of the engine did it for him. It was early November in Red Creek, a small town in eastern Colorado, and the heat began its climb before the sun even crested the horizon. The air was bone dry, the ground was cracked, and a fine layer of dust coated everything, like a second skin on the town itself. At the end of a packed dirt road stood a corrugated metal garage with weathered walls, where you could just make out the words on a swinging sign, Callahan and Son Garage, Eston 1987. Inside, amidst the smell of burnt oil and the clang of metal, James Callahan patiently cleaned the valve of an old tractor. At 36, Jim was the kind of man who said little and did much. He'd learned everything from his father, whose eyes were failing, but who could still diagnose an engine by sound alone, offering advice with uncanny precision. That morning, Jim was alone in the garage when a black corporate SUV pulled up, kicking up a cloud of dust that momentarily obscured the building's facade. A woman in a tailored blazer and impractical heels stepped out, clearly not dressed for the cracked, dusty earth. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her posture rigid. This was Dr. Evelyn Reed, automotive engineer and daughter of the new director of the agricultural conglomerate that had recently acquired a stake in the garage. She barely glanced at Jim. "We have a Series 8000 tractor down at the main farm," she stated, pulling a smartphone from her purse. "The engine's seized. I need someone out there immediately." Jim wiped his hands on a rag and replied calmly, "That model's sensitive to dust. It's better to bring it in here." She raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing on her lips. "And you understand these machines?" He just nodded, with the same quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need to prove, only to show. In that hot, silent garage, two worlds had just collided, and they clearly didn't speak the same language. Evelyn walked through the garage as if she were inspecting a condemned building. Her eyes scanned the tools, the makeshift workbenches, the grease-stained uniforms. It all struck her as dated, obsolete. "Does this thing still work?" she asked, gesturing to an old hydraulic lift. Sal, an older mechanic, simply shrugged. "Been working since '92. Never failed us." She didn't reply, just jotted something on her clipboard. Jim remained silent, watching, not with fear, but with the steady calm of a man who has seen too many people try to assert strength where they have no roots. Evelyn wasn't cruel, but she carried the impatience of someone accustomed to being heard long before she could ever be questioned. Educated in Germany, fluent in 3 languages, the daughter of an influential director, the world had always confirmed she was right. She expected the same here. "If I had a properly trained team, this tractor would already be running," she muttered, flipping through a technical manual in English. Sal started to respond, but Jim stopped him with a subtle motion. "That model tends to seize when the torque reducer misaligns with a clogged electronic filter." Evelyn laughed, not loudly, but with the condescending tone of an adult listening to a child explain physics. "And where did you read that?" "In a text message." A brief, uncomfortable silence fell over the garage. It wasn't respect, but embarrassment. Jim didn't answer. He simply returned to cleaning the part in his hands, as if he understood that time is a better rebuttal than ego. And in that space between her irony and his silence, the real tension began to build. 2 days later, Evelyn returned to the garage, this time in a greater hurry, with more sweat on her brow and far less patience. The tractor was still dead. None of the emergency technicians she had hired had managed to get so much as a rumble out of it. The engine remained silent, as if mocking her urgency. "Well, isn't your grease monkey going to take a shot?" she asked sarcastically, seeing Jim organizing screws into old coffee cans. Jim slowly looked up. I can try, if you'd like. She crossed her arms, challenging him in front of everyone. Sal, 2 apprentices, and even the parts delivery guy were standing nearby. And maybe that was precisely why Evelyn said what she did. Fine, if you can get that machine to start, I'll personally pay for your full ASE certification. The sentence landed with a thud on the concrete floor. It wasn't an offer. It was a put-down. A joke disguised as a proposal. No one laughed out loud, but the shifting glances said everything. One of the apprentices looked down, uneasy. Sal cleared his throat but stayed silent. Jim, however, didn't even blink. He wiped his hands, took a deep breath and replied, "A certificate won't fix pride, Mum, but I can take a look at the tractor." She gave a dismissive smile. "Be my guest. Just try not to blow anything up, okay?" And she walked away, as if the outcome was already a foregone conclusion. Jim returned to his bench. He said nothing more. But in that moment, something inside him shifted. It wasn't anger. It was something deeper. The kind of quiet resolve only those who have been repeatedly underestimated learn to carry. In the following days, Jim was sidelined. Evelyn began to centralize every decision in the shop. She changed the parts supplier, had Jim's father's old workbench removed, and ordered a new digital diagnostic scanner nobody there knew how to operate. Sal muttered out of the corner of his mouth, "She thinks if you stack enough new tech on a problem, the engine will fix itself." Jim didn't respond. He just moved his tools into a locker with a padlock and started working in the back of the garage, out of her sight. The other mechanics started avoiding long conversations when Evelyn was near. The atmosphere grew tense, mechanical, almost cold, but she didn't seem to notice or didn't care. The tractor, meanwhile, remained motionless. 2 specialists were brought in from out of state. One carried a case full of sensors, the other a laptop for remote diagnostics. Both left frustrated. "The ECU is locked. The system won't recognize the starter torque," one said. "The problem has to be in the command module." Annoyed, Evelyn ordered a brand new module, shipped overnight from Chicago. The cost was immense, but she was determined to prove she didn't need help from anyone, especially not from Jim. On the 3rd attempt, the system crashed completely. Now, not even the dashboard would light up. It was then that she began to lose her composure, and everyone saw it. On a sweltering morning, Mr. Davison, one of the conglomerate's investors, showed up unannounced. He was an older man in a simple shirt, a straw hat, and a watchful gaze. "So, Dr. Reed, have you made the beast roar yet?" he asked with a friendly smile. Evelyn hesitated. "We have a team of external specialists assessing it." Mr. Davison glanced toward the back, where Jim was sweeping the floor. "And what about him? Have you let the local boy take a crack at it?" She evaded the question. "I prefer to rely on technically backed solutions." Mr. Davison said nothing more, but Jim heard, and when no one was looking, he paused for a second, took a deep breath, and looked at the tractor as if he were recognizing an old pain. "Have you ever been pushed aside even when you knew you had the answer? Ever had to bite your tongue just to keep from fighting back at the wrong moment? If this scene makes your chest feel a little tight too, just type yes in the comments, so I know you're still here with me." That same night, long after the garage had fallen silent and the other mechanics had gone home, Jim stayed behind. The only sounds were the buzz of the fluorescent lights and the occasional pop of the cooling metal roof. Outside, the Colorado sky was a vast, starry expanse. Inside, the garage seemed to breathe more slowly. Jim opened the tractor's hood gently, as if asking for permission. He didn't use a tablet or gloves or a lab coat, just a flashlight duct-taped to his forehead, an old notebook, and the instinct of a man who listened to machines like they were sick people. He started by checking connections nobody else had bothered with. He regrounded the system with a repurposed copper wire. He disassembled the auxiliary module and cleaned it with a toothbrush. He disconnected sensors that didn't need to be active, and activated one no one had noticed, a small humidity sensor that locked the ignition in an overly dry environment. Sometimes he would pause, scratch his chin, and stare into space. Then he'd get back to it, as if he were having a silent conversation with the tractor. This went on for 3 nights, working after everyone had left, telling no one. His mother, Martha, would notice him coming home late, his brow slick with sweat. "Are you working on that tractor again?" she would ask. And Jim would just give a calm smile. "I'm just trying to understand what it's asking for." On the 4th day, he brought a toolbox from his father's time. Inside, he found a tool his dad had fabricated himself years ago, used to adjust steering columns that seized under extreme heat. He had completely forgotten it existed, but in that moment it felt like the missing piece. He went back to the tractor, adjusted a fitting with microscopic precision. He tightened the last bolt and wiped his forehead with his forearm. There was only one thing left to do: turn the key, but he didn't, not yet. He closed the hood, put everything back in its place. Then he switched off the lights and locked up the garage, leaving a promise hanging in the air. The next morning at 7, when Evelyn arrived with another specialist in tow, Jim was already there. He was sitting on a stool, drinking coffee from a thick ceramic mug, as if nothing had happened. But inside him, everything had already shifted. Evelyn had barely stepped into the garage before she started rattling off instructions to the technician beside her. "The new command module arrived yesterday. We'll install it directly and bypass the old system. If that doesn't work, we're replacing the entire ECU." The technician nodded, but before he could open the hood, Jim stood up slowly and spoke for the first time that morning. "Can I try something before you tear it all apart?" She turned her head slowly, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Another one of your homemade attempts?" "Just one turn of the key," he said. "That's all." Mr. Davison, who happened to be crossing the yard at that exact moment, overheard him. "Give him a chance, Doctor. Let's just see." An uneasy silence fell. Evelyn looked around as if hoping someone would back her up, but everyone was just waiting. Without another word, she handed Jim the tractor key. "Then, by all means, good luck." Jim climbed slowly into the cab, pressed 2 buttons on the panel with precise movements, manually adjusted the clutch pedal, and turned the key. The engine sputtered. Then it coughed, and then it roared to life. Not loud, but steady, constant, as if waking from a long, deep sleep. Everyone froze. Even the specialist from out of town, his briefcase in hand, stood motionless. The engine settled into a smooth, serene idle, as if to say, that's all it was. Jim hopped down from the cab and handed the key back to the engineer. It was an inverted charge build-up. The humidity sensor was locking the auxiliary circuit, and the reducer had a slight misalignment from the heat soak. Just had to reset the point. He said it simply, like he was describing the weather. Evelyn held the key, but she was speechless. There was no more irony in her eyes, just something new. Silence and respect. The engine kept running, its sound filling the space where before there had only been doubt. Evelyn stood there motionless, key in hand, staring at the tractor as if she were facing her own mistake, but still not knowing what to say. The technician beside her cleared his throat and commented in a tone of newfound respect. "Well, that wasn't in the manual." Jim just took a step back and began putting his tools away. There was no victorious smirk, no taunt. He didn't need it. But the silence that now surrounded him was different. It wasn't an absence of sound, it was reverence. Mr. Davison walked over to Evelyn and said quietly, "Sometimes the answer comes from the one who doesn't speak the loudest. You saw it yourself." She didn't respond right away. She just watched Jim put away his old tools one by one with the same care of someone closing a chapter. The following week, the conglomerate held a meeting with the entire technical staff. Evelyn, now with a more subdued demeanor, presented a new plan for reorganizing the garage. Jim was officially promoted to Field Maintenance Coordinator. He hadn't asked for the position. He didn't expect it, but he had earned it. At the end of the meeting, as everyone was leaving, she approached him quietly. "Remember that offer I made?" she asked, a vulnerable smile on her face. He looked her in the eye. "The certification course, right?" She nodded. "Yeah, but I think I'm the one who needs the lesson now." For the first time, a small smile touched the corner of Jim's mouth. "I can teach you, but only if you leave the heels at home." And this time, she was the one who laughed. Not every lesson is taught by someone with eloquent words. Sometimes it comes from the calloused hands of someone taught by time. Evelyn had grown up surrounded by formulas, theories, and certainties. But in that forgotten garage, she learned something no university can teach, that respect isn't born from authority, it's born from listening. Jim never wanted to prove a point. He wasn't in a hurry. He had no ambition to defeat anyone. He just wanted to be allowed to do what he knew best. But in the instant that engine turned over, the world quietly rearranged itself. She saw it. They all saw it. And when someone sees the truth with humility, there is no room left for vanity. What was once contempt turned into admiration. What was a joke became reverence. Because true talent doesn't shout, it acts. And sooner or later, quiet competence breaks through even the thickest walls of prejudice. The lesson remained. Humiliating someone for their lack of a diploma might just be the start of your own greatest shame. And recognizing true expertise, even when it's covered in grease, is a sign of greatness, not weakness. If this story resonated with you in any way, hitting that like button shows us we're on the right track. Let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. Seriously, I read them all, and I make a point to personally reply to everyone who takes a moment to share. And if you believe in the power of stories like this, subscribe so you don't miss what's next. This channel is just getting started, and every new subscriber gives me the strength to continue this mission. I'm counting on you. Don't go just yet. Choose one of the 2 stories I've put on the screen for you to watch right now. I'll see you in the next video.